Thanks to everyone out there for tuning in. We're so excited to have you. As Daniel mentioned today, and for this panel, we'll be really digging into water and several problems we're collectively facing with water, but then also how an exciting opportunity with philanthropy is helping us to scale up and address those issues. So just as brief way of introduction here, if you've been in the Hill Country for any length of time, you know that this is a region marked by extremes in water ranging from drought to flood. Other pressures threaten this iconic region, including sprawling and largely unregulated development, groundwater overuse, unprecedented population growth, land fragmentation, direct discharge of wastewater into our rivers and streams, and a changing climate on top of all of that. As a response to these challenges, as a response to all these challenges, number of partners both here and not joining on the call recognize that if we were going to address these challenges, we'd be able to accomplish more working together than working individually. And as conversations arose around that very idea, a coalition of nonprofits, academic institutions, government agencies, and aligned private businesses came together in 2017 to form the Texas Hill Country Conservation Network. The network was created in order to advance shared conservation goals and to scale our collective impact when it comes to meeting the challenges that are facing the Hill Country. Recognizing the unique opportunity and the potential here in the Hill Country, a group of national funders invited the network in the summer of 2019 to become a partner in something called the Water Funder Initiative. The Water Funder Initiative, or WFI for short, seeks to advance and accelerate progress towards two overarching goals. The first is to bring basins and watersheds into balance for people and nature, and the other is to strengthen the resilience of watersheds and water systems in a 21st century climate. The Water Funder Initiative seeks to catalyze philanthropy by incentivizing new and increased giving and through a first come, first served matching grant opportunity that we've been fortunate to participate in. Network partners represented here have really risen to the challenge, and we've collectively been able to bring down $1.1 million in new funding to Texas to help address conservation challenges here in the Hill Country. The three programmatic areas that the network is focusing on are: one, to advance One Water in Austin and the Hill Country; to enhance sustainable groundwater management to ensure continued spring flow; and to secure sustainable financing for watershed protection. While the challenges that are facing the Hill Country are many, the good news is that we have some of the best and brightest minds in Central Texas in conservation right here working on them. Today, we've lined up 8 individuals to share about the work that they and their organizations are doing in what we're referring to as a lightning round, where you'll be able to hear from each of them during a brief 5-minute burst. And before I hand it off to these individuals, I'd like to just briefly introduce each one. It would take me the rest of the hour to really dig into all of their accomplishments and accolades, so I'll just briefly mention their names and the organizations they work with, and then at that point I'll get out of the way and turn it over to them. The first person you'll be hearing from today is Sharlene Leurig, who's the Chief Executive Officer at Texas Watershed. She also served as the chair for Austin's Water Forward Task Force, which developed a groundbreaking 100-year water management plan for the city. Next, you'll be hearing from Vanessa Puig-Williams, who serves as director of the Environmental Defense Fund's Texas Water Program, where she leads efforts to advance sustainable groundwater management here in Texas. Next, you'll be hearing from Jennifer Walker, who's the deputy director for the Texas Coast and Waters Program at the National Wildlife Federation, and she also serves as a leader for the Texas Living Waters Project. After Jennifer, you'll hear from Frank Davis, who serves as the Chief Conservation Officer at the Hill Country Conservancy, where he oversees conservation and stewardship efforts of over 10,000 acres. After Frank, you'll hear from Katherine, who serves as the Executive Director of Hill Country Alliance. You've already heard from her earlier if you were able to be online right at 2 o'clock. She serves as chair of the network and also serves on the board of the Hill Country Land Trust. After Katherine, we'll have Emma Lindrose-Siegel, who serves as the Chief Development Officer for the Great Springs Project, an organization that is working hard to develop a national park scale corridor of protected lands between Austin and San Antonio with a trail network that connects 4 of Texas's iconic springs. After Emma, we'll have Robin Gary, who serves as Managing Director with Wimberley Valley Watershed Association, an organization that's been working for decades to protect Jacob's Well and the ecosystem surrounding it. And they work hard to reconnect people to nature and to advance policies that ensure water quality and availability for future generations. And last but certainly not least, you'll hear from Robert Mace, who is the Executive Director and Chief Water Policy Officer at the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment, and also serves as a Professor of Practice in the Department of Geography at Texas State University. I know I mentioned Katherine serves as the chair of the network. We also have several executive and steering committee members on this call. And last but not least, two of the individuals on this call are either currently moonlighting or previously moonlighted as DJs. So I will let you in the audience guess who that might be over the course of this discussion. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to Sharlene to tell us about all the great work that Texas Water Trade is up to.
Thanks so much, John. I'm going to share my screen and hope that this all works okay. So I'm so excited for this panel. I get to work with all these people almost every day. I love what all of them are doing so much. I'm really looking forward to hearing from them. I wanted to share a little bit about the way that the Water Funder Initiative commitment has helped us scale the work that we've been doing with our colleagues here, and just how important it's been to be able to bring that national funding to a place that is rapidly growing, a population that's going to double by 2050, and that couldn't be a more important place for national funding to come leverage the long-term commitment that's been in place from our local foundations who've supported what we've done so far. So just quickly, so that y'all are oriented to Texas Water Trade, because we're kind of one of the new kids on the scene in this kind of dais today. We were started in early 2019, and we were set up with the purpose of building environmental water markets across the state. So we come to things with a market-oriented view. And what I'm going to talk to you today about is maybe not traditionally seen as being environmental water markets, but we see as being some of the tools that are so important in Texas, where we have amazing financial vehicles that can help us build the future we want for sustainable water, whether that is protecting watersheds, so looking at the natural world as a type of infrastructure that provides water supply and water quality services, and investing in the protection of those provisions, or if it's scaling downscaled water supply and treatment and infrastructure that tries to bring water treatment and provision as close to the source of demand as possible. And both of those we think are incredibly important for us to create sustainable solutions. So for the first, the investing in natural infrastructure, we were able to bring in the support of a local foundation, the Birding Johnson Foundation, which supports watershed protection in Hays County. And we were, with that commitment, began our work in trying to exercise a muscle that really has been underused in the state of Texas, that we think is pivotal for funding the protection of lands that are storing and cleaning the water that we all depend on. So the state revolving fund is more than $500 million a year that Texas administers through our water infrastructure bank, the Texas Water Development Board. It primarily goes to all engineered wastewater treatment plants, stormwater projects, things that are made out of concrete and metal, and that provide the things that we typically think about when we think about clean water. But that SRF program has been used in many other places in the US to purchase land for outright acquisition for conservation easements, riparian restoration, and we want to see that in Texas, and saw a real glimmer of the beginnings of that with the city of San Marcos getting the first state revolving fund loan for land protection in downtown San Marcos. We were so pleased with the Birding Johnson Foundation and in coordination with the Country Conservancy to be able to work with Hays County to apply for a $30 million state revolving fund loan that would help that county establish a water quality land protection fund. That does a couple things. One, that's in the intended use plan this year, and if it gets funded through a loan, it would be 15 times more funding than has ever flowed through the state revolving fund for land protection. We think that's an amazing second step, because it would be the second program that's ever been funded through SRF funding for land protection. So it's a pretty big second step. And we're committed to continuing that work, and we're really pleased to be able to help Hays County through that journey. And also for that commitment from the Birding Johnson Foundation with the Water Funder Initiative to be able to help us also invest resources in another important leg of the stool that John talked about, which is about shifting how we source our water. So yes, continue to protect our natural infrastructure, our aquifers and our rivers, but also recognizing that we're in the 21st century, headed to the 22nd. We have the opportunity to manage water in a totally different way than we were able to in the early 20th century when we started building our water systems. And we should start looking at buildings themselves as reservoirs and as wastewater treatment systems. And that is a future that we're investing in as a community of practitioners, many of whom are on this panel today in the city of Austin. With the WFI commitment, we're going to be working with the city of Austin, National Wildlife Federation, as well as a partner, to investigate how another very scalable financing vehicle known as PACE financing, which has already funded $100 million in water and energy efficiency projects at the building scale in Texas, how that could be used to make on-site water projects, rainwater capture, on-site gray water, wastewater treatment, whatever it might be, make that affordable, reduce that upfront cost to developers, and especially now, given where we are in the economic environment and with the deep concern in this Austin metropolitan area around affordable housing, to be able to do that in a way that protects the affordability of our water supplies and creates that resilience and diversity. So we're so thrilled to have the WFI commitment allow us to continue that work. We think it's really path-breaking nationally, and we look forward to reporting back on outcomes of that next year. So John, I think that's all I wanted to say for now, and I look forward to the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharlene. Vanessa, you're ready whenever you're ready. We'd love to hear from you and the great work that EDF's up to.
Oh, I think Charlene's got to stop screen sharing hers.
I know I'm able to see your screen. I don't know if others are.
Yeah, that's good.
You can see it? You're able to see my screen right now?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Then here we go. So thank you guys for having me today to talk about EDF's new water program here in Texas. We actually launched the program in February. That's when I started, right before the entire world changed. So it's been interesting working for a new organization and building out a new program during the time of COVID. But I think we're making really good progress, and this Water Funders Initiative opportunity is just an example of that. So I want to tell you just a little bit about the program. In general, our main goal at EDF and the water program and the water program here in Texas as well is to ensure that we are managing water resources and in a way that ensures they're resilient for the future. EDF is a solution-oriented organization, and our motto is finding the ways that work. We use science and stakeholder engagement to advance economically sensible policy and approaches that protect everyone, including all groundwater users. Our focus in Texas, at least initially, is going to be on groundwater, because groundwater is the least understood and most undermanaged resource in Texas. And groundwater conservation districts are the only entities in Texas that are charged with conserving groundwater, yet they often lack funding and the science and resources to do their jobs. Yeah, as we all know, and I'm sure has been discussed, frequently so far during the summit, groundwater is vital to the economic well-being of rural communities in the whole country, and to sustain, and all over the state really, and to sustaining springs and rivers across the state. The Texas Water Development Board estimates that 30% of the water in rivers across the state originates from groundwater. And nowhere is this connection more apparent or significant than here in the Hill Country, where headwater springs sustained by groundwater form the majority of rivers that make their way to the Texas coast. So we are excited to be able to leverage the Water Funders Initiative grant, which we received. Can y'all see that screen? I'm sorry, some things just kind of happened with my computer. Are y'all able to see that?
I'm so
Good.
Yeah.
Our program is funded primarily by the Mitchell Foundation and the Meadows Foundation. And so we were able to use funding that we received from the Meadows Foundation as the match for Water Funders Initiative. So we are really appreciative of the Meadows Foundation supporting our work and Mitchell as well in the whole country. And what we are planning on doing in our program is to really be a resource and an advocate for groundwater conservation districts so that we can ensure they have the tools, the science, and the funding and authorities to be able to effectively and sustainably manage groundwater. Because if we can develop and demonstrate cases on the ground for effective groundwater management, then we'll be well positioned to argue for reforms at the state legislature. We also intend to use this funding to continue to educate policymakers at the state legislature as well. We're working on a 3D animation of visual effects of how groundwater and surface water interact in the whole country. That's going to be a really unique, I think, resource as we discuss how we can move towards more holistic management of groundwater and surface water. And finally, we are also going to use the Water Funders Initiative funding to do some research on equity issues and how they relate to groundwater management in the whole country. It's something that we've recognized that we don't fully understand. And so we would like to learn more about that and then identify some groups that we could potentially partner with to work together on how we might have a more diverse and equitable engagement with underrepresented communities in the whole country that may not necessarily be involved in groundwater management and policy. So I hope that gives a good overview of our program and how we intend to use the funding, and I look forward to answering questions later.
great. Thank you so much, Vanessa. Next, I'd love to turn the mic over to Jennifer Walker with National Wildlife Federation.
Hello. I need to pull up my slides. I think you have to stop sharing yours, Vanessa.
Got it.
Handoff complete. Okay. Here's my slides.
We'll get all the tech worked out by the very end.
Exactly. It'll be like butter by the end. Here we go. Okay. Good afternoon. I want to give you a brief overview of, just advancing my slides willy-nilly. I want to give you a brief overview of the work that National Wildlife Federation and our partners have been doing in Austin and the Hill Country. For the past several years, we've been focused on urban water management and have been working to implement policies and practices that will ensure our communities have the tools in place to effectively manage their water supplies. Our goal is to make sure that we have a secure water supply for our communities, while also ensuring that we leave water in our rivers and streams to support a healthy fish and wildlife habitat, recreational use and enjoyment, and downstream uses. As we all know, we accomplish more when we work together and apply our collective knowledge and efforts. Some of our partners are the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment, Hill Country Alliance, Texas Water Trade, Wimberley Valley Watershed Alliance, EDF, practically everybody whose faces you can see on this, and then more. So I want to acknowledge that we're not working in a vacuum whatsoever. So we believe that the One Water approach provides a pathway that can expand water management beyond water supply so we can achieve healthy waterways and other community benefits. This is especially important in the Hill Country. We recently partnered with the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment and the Pacific Institute to develop a planning framework that provides specific guidance on how to plan for and incorporate healthy waterways as a One Water planning outcome. This effort was supported by the Mitchell Foundation, and we received a matching grant to further this work from Water Funder Initiative. So a little bit about the framework. Based on our experience working in the One Water space, we recognized that we needed to consider how One Water and healthy waterway outcomes could be woven together. There are implicit environmental benefits to using One Water strategies because it can often lead to less need for surface and groundwater supplies, thus leaving that precious water in our rivers and aquifers. But what if we explicitly include healthy waterways as a planning outcome? By doing this, we can have lasting positive impacts. Good planning helps avoid unintended consequences and future uncertainty. Failing to proactively consider healthy waterways and planning can result in impaired waterways, loss of streamside recreational value, and other impacts. Each of those outcomes increases the likelihood that water management decisions will have to be revisited, resulting in increased cost, additional unpredictability, and the loss of public trust. So through interviews with planners, water managers, and engineers, we found that in general, assessments of impacts to rivers are not being included in existing One Water planning efforts, particularly during the critical early planning stages. And we also heard that there's no clear guidance on how to incorporate these concepts into a typical One Water planning process. So with all this in mind, we've developed a One Water planning framework that is designed to help planners consider and incorporate healthy waterways into community planning efforts. We break down the framework into 4 steps, and we provide detailed guidance for each. It's meant to be complementary to and to integrate into existing One Water planning frameworks. And our hope is that by taking this proactive approach, that the results will be a plan that addresses not only community water supply, but also includes healthy waterways and other community benefits as outcomes. We just published this framework, and we hope to work with cities and planners, especially in the Hill Country, to incorporate these planning concepts as they embark on One Water planning efforts. And continuing on, for the last several years, we've been working with partners on several projects that will institutionalize One Water as an essential management strategy in the Hill Country. We are continuing that work into the next year and beyond. And my time is short, so I'm just going to go over a few items, but feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to learn more about any of these or see an opportunity for us to work together. We've hit a big milestone and moved into the implementation phase for Austin's Water Forward Plan. There are several code changes pending that will put in place the first major elements of the implementation of Austin's Water Forward Plan. These codes include regulatory framework and incentives that underlie Austin's on-site water reuse system requirements. That's quite a mouthful, but Austin is going to be ground truthing and developing the framework around these important strategies, and then we can use them in the Hill Country after they've figured it all out for us. We're taking a close look at how to ensure that One Water can be implemented in our communities in a way that's equitable and affordable. Working with Texas Water Trade, we're evaluating whether or not the PACE program can help offset the cost of implementation of One Water strategies. We will also be engaging with others to understand the issues around affordability and to proactively address them. I think this is an essential piece of bringing One Water to scale in the Hill Country. We are engaging with school districts in Austin and the Hill Country to ensure that new schools incorporate One Water practices in their design. The Wimberley Primary School is a great example of this, and we're working with AISD on a middle school in the Mueller development to include as many One Water strategies as we can. We are also coordinating with the engineering community and regional leaders to make One Water principles central to their work and their future RFPs. As part of this process, Hill Country Alliance is developing a survey of resources that Hill Country communities can use, and we're applying all of our collective knowledge to that. We will convene workshops and webinars to bring stakeholders together and to make important connections and to try to normalize this type of work that's kind of novel at this point in many communities. And finally, we're working close.
Move on. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah. We're working with the Meadows Center on removing impediments to One Water. So that was my final one. So thank y'all.
All right. So sorry to have to cut you off.
Oh, no worries. That was my last sentence.
Okay.
Timed it well.
I I'd be remiss if I didn't mention two things about Jennifer before we keep on moving along. One is that Jennifer served as the vice chair for the Austin Water Forward Task Force. So she and Sharlene really helped shepherd that process through. And like our next speaker, Frank Davis, Jennifer serves on both the executive and the steering committee for the Texas Hill Country Conservation Network. And we're really grateful for both of their service in that regard. Frank, with that, I'd love to turn things over to you and hear about what Hill Country Conservancy is up to.
Sure. Let's see. I'm sharing my screen. Can you confirm you can see that? Good. Well, hello, everybody. John introduced me earlier. I'm Frank Davis. I'm the Chief Conservation Officer at Hill Country Conservancy, which is just a sort of silly way of saying that I work with private landowners on our conservation projects. Generally speaking, those projects span the gamut from land stewardship projects to various forms of long-term planning, including conservation easements. And of course, our work would not be possible without significant financing, particularly because of the development growth and growth throughout the Hill Country. Land values are through the roof, and we're trying to get ahead of it. And there's a lot of work that we need to do in the near term to really have a significant impact on truly preserving this landscape so that it can be healthy and effective in providing these ecosystem services that we're all so concerned about. So we've been very focused in working with the Texas Hill Country Conservation Network through the Water Funder Initiative on identifying ways to develop sustainable financing for watershed protection. So I will talk about a few examples of those briefly. So the first one relates to the Hays County bond. I don't know if folks have been tracking this very closely, but we're very excited. We've made a lot of progress on this front. We're looking at the prospect for some funds to come out of a bond that would be voted on in November of this year. The Water Funder Initiative provided funding to cover really all aspects of advocating for the bond with the Hays County Commissioners Court, working with their attorney, helping to develop a Parks and Open Space Advisory Commission to help to rank prospective projects, and also in the future to do some public education around the bond. Hill Country Conservancy is one of over a dozen partners working on that. We've been very active, but we're certainly not alone in that effort. So it's very much a collaborative effort, and I think that WFI and certainly the network is geared towards promoting efforts like that. So good news on that, pardon me, I flipped too quickly. Good news on that is that we will have a $75 million bond measure on the ballot in November. So in spite of COVID and all the scares around that, polling really indicates that there's a lot of support. I think it was from 71 to 76% support was found through that poll. And that means there's a very good prospect for passage of that bond. We also would like this to be a model for other efforts throughout the Hill Country. The related effort that was already touched upon by Sharlene, and I think she covered it quite well, relates to funding through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. As Sharlene mentioned, this is really the first of its kind at this scope. The city of San Marcos deserves all the credit for being the first to do watershed conservation through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. They even received some loan forgiveness, so that was like a grant. So there's a lot of opportunities here. But thanks to the efforts of Texas Water Trade in partnership with Hill Country Conservancy in Hays County, there is a proposal out there at least for $30 million. And it's important to note that there are not identified specific land projects in that proposal. It's really about protecting watershed lands in general. So we're really testing the limits of what this program can fund. And then finally, we're looking at source water protection fees. So I gave two examples of financing programs, which if you're really paying attention, and even if you're a little bit critical, you might be saying, well, wait a second, you said sustainable financing. A bond is a one-time thing. You spend the money, then you got to go do another bond. A loan is similar in that fashion, although we could argue that funding through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, if we can really get our foot in the door, we're developing a new source of funding that will be available in the future. Source water protection fees would be a prime example of that. So this is very, very simple concept, and it's used throughout other parts of the U.S., but this would be a small charge on your water bill, say 50 cents or $1. This would be separate from the drainage utility fees that some are familiar with in Austin, but it's a small charge on the bill that generates quite a lot of funding. And it could be underwritten by a Clean Water State Revolving Fund that provides a low interest loan to develop a big bucket of money for source water protection. So Hill Country Conservancy has been working with Hill Country Alliance and the network to develop a feasibility study around this. So we're trying to get a sense of what might be possible based on where these lands are, what the cost is to protect them, and then aligning that with the desires and needs of those water providers throughout the Hill Country. So again, prime example of sustainable financing, and we're just grateful to WFI and all the partners in the network for making this possible.
Thanks, Frank. Really exciting stuff, as is everything we've heard and everything we will hear. So thank you. Next, I'd like to turn things over to Katherine Romans, who I occasionally refer to as El Jefe, the fearless leader of Hill Country Alliance. I'll turn things over to her to talk about.
I prefer La Jefe, La Jefe. Thank you, John. Thank you guys all for being on this panel. We so appreciate your time and passion and sharing your incredible work. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Hill Country Alliance and how we have kind of factored into this Water Funder Initiative opportunity. And I guess I'll just start by saying this is probably the biggest challenge of the whole summit, is how to fit all of the Water Funder Initiative work into a 5-minute or less presentation. So I appreciate everyone's working within our lightning round time constraints. So I didn't really get a chance to kind of introduce the Hill Country Alliance. And for those who maybe are on this Zoom who aren't very familiar with us, the Hill Country Alliance's mission is really all about bringing groups and organizations, individuals, landowners, businesses, elected officials together who share a common interest in protecting the natural and cultural resources of the Texas Hill Country. So this map is the region that we work in, and it's an incredible, it is the heart of Texas, as I like to say, and really the definition of the Hill Country is our water resources. So you can see on this map, the thick purple lines kind of outline our river basins in the region. You can see some of the shading that really indicates the aquifers that underpin those resources, those river resources. And you've heard a little bit about that from Vanessa and others. One of the most important ways that the Hill Country Alliance accomplishes our work of protecting the land and water, the communities, and the night skies of the Texas Hill Country is through collaboration, bringing partners together, finding ways that we can scale our collective work. And so this idea of the Texas Hill Country Conservation Network that came from David Baker and the Wimberley Valley Watershed Association and Ira Yates, who I mentioned at the top of this meeting years ago, and research funded by the Mitchell Foundation to look at kind of the broad landscape of conservation groups working in Central Texas, has really grown into this incredible power for good through this opportunity with the Water Funder Initiative. John outlined the 3 major focus areas of that initiative, and you've heard a little bit from some of the other speakers about specific projects around securing sustainable funding for watershed protection, advancing groundwater protection for continued spring flow, scaling the use of One Water across the Hill Country. I'll just say that the Hill Country Alliance is partnering with different organizations on each one of those projects. And we've got little pieces and are really playing a supporting role to some of our partners on carrying the heavy water, so to speak, on those projects. What I really wanted to focus on is the Hill Country Alliance's role on supporting this collaborative approach and the opportunity that the Water Funder Initiative and the new dollars coming into Central Texas has created. So very first thing that is a core focus for us is providing backbone support for the network. We have been convening more than 75 different organizations for really the past several years, getting together twice a year to find ways that we can collaborate more effectively, to improve our strategic focus, and to find new connections and new partners to join our work. We've created several action teams. As John mentioned, created a steering committee and executive committee to provide some governance to just how this collective impact model really works. And then not even a year ago, brought on John Rooney, our moderator for today, as the very first full-time staff person who is solely dedicated to supporting the work of this collective of all of these conservation organizations. So the Water Funder Initiative has allowed us to really focus on getting the work done and continuing to support how we all work together more effectively. The second thing I really wanted to highlight was how the network has been able to scale funding coming into Central Texas, and a new initiative that we're going to be kicking off, providing some immediate response in light of the global pandemic and COVID. So the Water Funder Initiative we've been talking about, it's a great opportunity to leverage dollars from foundations outside of Texas to invest in the work happening here. And that really has been organized and spearheaded by not only John Rooney, but also Amy Kroll on the Hill Country Alliance staff. We have invested a ton of time and energy in trying to maximize the dollars that we can bring and push out to our partners. As a part of that, the Water Funder Initiative funders have asked us to think about how we're responding to a global pandemic and economic downturn. And so part of those matching dollars are going to be turned into a $50,000 emergency response fund for COVID relief for our conservation partners. We really recognize that there are small organizations working on the ground having huge impact for the Hill Country, and we don't want to see a loss in capacity of those organizations just as we are kind of taking off on this collective approach to conservation. So we're really excited about launching that emergency response fund.
Katherine, I hate to do this, but since you asked me to be strict on time, I'll have to ask you to
all right, as La Jefe, I'm going to claim my last 45 seconds on this one because it's so important, and that is the network's role in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of our work. And so partnering with lots of folks that are already on this call, including EDF, including HCC and National Wildlife Federation, we're going to be undertaking, I think, all of the most important steps on making sure that we as the conservation community are representing the full diversity of the Texas Hill Country. So doing the research, doing the planning, and really investing in new partnerships to scale our work with those folks that we may not be working with already. So that is, I'll stop there and just say we're really excited about the impacts that the Water Funder Initiative has enabled on the ground, and I'm excited to turn it over.
Awesome.
Thanks, you for
Katherine.
reining me in.
Next, I'd love to hand things over to Emma with Great Springs Project.
Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. Give me a second to share my screen. Whoops. Hi, well, it is a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon and an honor to be speaking with this panel on behalf of Great Springs Project. It's also a privilege to be a match recipient of the Water Funder Initiative. There's been a lot of work in this space for many years, and this is a exciting time to see the network bring everyone together through WFI to focus on the Hill Country, maximize resources, and collaborate on existing and new funding opportunities. As it's been said by several folks on the panel already, this work doesn't exist in silos, and the name of the game really is collaboration. At Great Springs Project, we actually refer to our mission and vision as our purpose and our promise. And our purpose is a national park-size corridor of protected lands between the urban areas of San Antonio and Austin over the Edwards Aquifer Recharge and Contributing Zones. Our promise is for this green conservation corridor to be connected by a network of trails linking the 4 Great Springs from Barton to Comal or San Marcos, Comal Springs, and the Blue Hole in San Antonio. Ultimately, when we're successful, you'll be able to get on a hike and bike trail from the Alamo to the Capitol. The last round of WFI match support for the Great Springs project works to advance sustainable financing for hill country conservation efforts through several projects. A lot of them have already been outlined by project partners on this call, so a little bit of this is repeat information. One of the areas is the acquisition and analysis of data on the effect of the imposition of conservation easements on hill country land prices, expected rates of return, holding periods for land transaction to facilitate cases for increased giving from individual donors, foundations, our corporate partners in the area, all of this contributing to land conservation projects as program-related investments. So we work really closely with our network partners to identify these priority parcels in the 4-county corridor being Travis, Hays, Comal, and Bexar County based on connectivity of protected lands, endangered species habitat, issues like that. We also work to continue developing the case for using municipal utility source water protection, fees and drainage fees as funding sources for land conservation projects. The primary case that's outlined this work is set out in the Revenues for Land Protection by Texas Water Trade. So working closely with them on this project has been really important. And then also supporting existing on-the-ground efforts to coordinate advocacy on a regional basis and bring properties into conservation. The most recent example that's already been talked about by several project partners and panelists on this call is the Hays and Comal County open space bond elections coming up. And so all of this is a part of the scaling up of the work in this region, in the Hill Country. We're really grateful to be a part of the network and to the network for bringing this Water Funder Initiative match to our region. So thank you. I'm looking forward to the Q&A. I've also included my email here in case you have additional questions about the work or the partnerships or things we don't get to in the panel discussion.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emma.
Emma gets a gold star for staying within her time.
With that, I'd love to turn things over to Robin next to tell us about the great work that Wimberley Valley Watershed Association is. And Robin, it looks like you're still on mute. There we go.
All right, you looking at my screen? Great. It's nice to be here with everyone. I was taking a look into the audience and I saw so many names and I wished I could see so many faces because this really is a virtual powerhouse that we have amassed between the panelists and the audience. And it's a pleasure to be here virtually with you today. We're talking about ways that the Water Funder Initiative has augmented and enhanced existing projects. And I recently joined the team. You guys know David Baker, and it is such a pleasure to be able to work with him and Ray Tilly and Ellen Evans here at the Wimberley Valley Watershed Association. The three rungs or the three opportunities that really got the boost. One is enhancing groundwater management. And in our area, there was a big win. It was a long fought battle to increase the toolbox or the tools that the Hays Trinity Groundwater Conservation District has to address groundwater protection, coordination of use, and really take care of the spring shed in Jacob's Well. So they recently, as far as March 2020, passed a rule that established the Jacob's Well groundwater management zone and also set up the regional recharge study area seen on the map. This was not something that just happened overnight. It was a long discussion, and the prior efforts that really led up to this really started back. They have roots in desired future conditions, discussions, and lengthy stakeholder involvement, and the technical committee that ultimately published the recommendation for the GMZ. So I'm very proud, and we're very proud that they have the tool, because in August and September of this year, the groundwater management zone set forth the curtailments because of drought. And earlier in the panel, we talked about the importance of groundwater for surface water in the hill country. They're tied together. And the Blanco River and Cypress Creek are definitely groundwater dependent resources. Jacob's Well provides the headwater, or serves as the headwater for Cypress Creek, and then Pleasant Valley Springs and Park Springs provide the base flow for this portion, the upstream portion of the Blanco River. And after long periods of no rainfall, we see declines in the base flow, and that turns to be very problematic, particularly for Cypress Creek and Jacob's Well, as flows dip down into below 5 cubic feet per second. You really see an increase in the amplitude of the flow. That's due to groundwater pumping. So it's vitally important that the tools be there to be able to manage this resource. Here on the hydrograph, you can see where the drought was declared in August and in September. And if you take a look back at the period of record, I've color coded those same times. This is something that we've got to really address and get good at managing if we want to keep Cypress Creek and the Blanco River clean, clear, and flowing. The lower graph there gives a little bit more detail. It's the logarithmic scale, so you can really see that flows do get very, very low very quick. We offer solutions to this, and you can't just complain and see the challenges without offering solutions. So multi-scale solutions for One Water include the Wimberley Valley Watershed Association office. We've got bioswales and rainwater harvesting, and you can even see down at the bottom where the pump in the well that serves the office and the residences there transitioned into a more stable situation because it wasn't being used. The rainwater harvesting system was there. So we're walking the talk, or walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And you've heard mention of the Blue Hole Primary School. This was a huge collaboration and effort to build the One Water School here in Wimberley, based on the STEM principles for One Water. And it's happening, and it's so exciting to see where you've got rainwater providing the non-potable supply for the gray water system that flushes toilets and includes the student population in the solution and better management. The on-site system there beneficially reuses the water, and the rainwater harvesting and AC condensate actually provide the fire flows for the school also. And if we can trickle this up into the regional solution, Blanco has a fantastic opportunity to really leverage these One Water solutions for regional benefit. We've seen that in the direct discharge, when wastewater enters the Blanco, the high nitrogen creates massive problems and manifests in algae blooms. And in 2020, just recently, actually 8 months ago, they stopped discharging into the river, and we saw the river clear up and the algae clear up also. So this is a great opportunity, and recently the Blanco City Council established a task force to look into this regional scale One Water solution. So we're very proud to be able to support that and better support it now with the Water Funder Initiative dollars.
Robin, I hate to cut you off. Wimberley Valley is doing such great work, but unfortunately we're gonna have to move on.
Absolutely.
Any final closing thoughts you want to share?
Land is the next thing, and land conservation and the bond initiative is certainly something that we'll support too, but that's been mentioned many times before.
Awesome, thank you. I'm
Yep.
sorry.
No, that's good.
Well, last but not least, I'd love to hand things over to Dr. Robert Mace at the Meadows Center and hear about the great work that's going on based out in San Marcos. Oh, I think you're on mute, Robert.
I hope before the end of this pandemic, I figure that out, because I do that all the time.
Classic Robert Mace.
I just want to say it's a great pleasure and honor to be on this panel with a bunch of friends and collaborators. Just real quickly, those of you that don't know, we're with the Meadow Center for Water and the Environment, research institute at the Texas State University, and we're involved in a number of things related to water. And the Hill Country is literally in our backyard, because our office, which is that building you see there, is perched on the Balcones Fault Zone. We got the Hill Country behind us, and the Gulf Coastal Plain in front of us. And many of us live in the Hill Country and are active in dealing with Hill Country issues. We're involved in One Water, Blanca River, Cypress Creek, wastewater issues, land conservation, groundwater resource sustainability, policy analysis, moving into climate change, and then also moving into equity issues. I just signed up a student to work together on equity in water in Texas. So you've heard folks talk about issues in the Hill Country. You know, the population growth is quite shocking. Sharlene mentioned a doubling of population growth for Texas, but in the satellite counties, we're talking, triple or more population expected over the next 50 years. And as this headline shows in the Austin Chronicle, there's too many straws in the well or in the aquifer. It's kind of the death of Hill Country springs by 1,000 water pumps. And so there's a need for better tools. There's groundwater models out there, but they're regional, and they don't do a good job presently at representing surface water groundwater interaction. And it's not only important for the Trinity Aquifer and Jacob's Well, which has been a popular image for the slides today, justifiably so, but also for the Edwards Aquifer, because water that flows out of the Hill Country also recharges the Edwards Aquifer and benefits San Marcos Springs, Barton Springs, and Kamal. So what we're doing to address that particular technical issue is working to develop a model that we call the Blanca River Aquifer Assessment Tool. If we go long, we'll say for water and understanding resiliency and sustainability trends, which spells out to bratwurst. Had a potential funder say, if you could add beer to the end of that, we'll give you some funding. So we added, and the betterment of environmental and ecological resources. Science and conservation are serious, but we need to have fun doing this as well. We've completed phase one, which is the conceptual model, basically putting together the data and our understanding of how the system works. And then phase two is developing the actual model, as well as doing a sustainability analysis. And a big reason for doing this model is to accurately represent surface water groundwater interaction, and then be able to use that model to determine what the impacts of pumping and future pumping might be on springs, base flow, flows in the river. And of course, that has consequences for the springs and environmental flows. The Water Funders Initiative funding is going to help us leverage funding from other sources, which has included the Ways, Tito's, Berdine Johnson. And we're thankful that we've got funding commitments from Hays County, Area Groundwater Conservation Districts, and the Texas Water Development Board. Ultimately, this is going to become a valuable management tool for the area shown on the map there. But also it's going to be able to scale up to use across the Hill Country, because this area is not the only area that is struggling with this, and as well as the state. And with that, I'll turn it back over to John.
All right, thanks, Robert. Well, let me just say thank you to each and every one of you for all of the fantastic work you're doing and for your partnership. As I mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of challenges facing the Hill Country when it comes to water, but hearing about the work that all of you are doing gives me a lot of hope that we are going to meet those challenges. With that, I'd love to call on my colleague, Leah, to just in case if we have any questions from the audience. I know we're coming up on the hour, but I'd love to fit as many in as we can before Katherine brings us home with some closing remarks.
Awesome. Yeah, so one question is in the chat currently that I think may be a question a lot of folks have on their mind. They're wondering if Hill Country Alliance is the clearinghouse of information for all of these groups. And if not, which we're not, how should folks go about contacting us on the network? Yeah, well, I'm happy to take a stab and then, yeah, see if others have thoughts. The Hill Country Alliance is very, very happy to be playing in this backbone role, but obviously there is so much expertise in this panel and well beyond this panel with all of our other partners across the Hill Country, that I would never think that we are going to be the sole go-to for Hill Country conservation issues. That being said, we are happy to be a directory if you do have questions about how we're approaching groundwater management as the region, how land conservation can be scaled up and accelerated, who's the right person to talk to when it comes to making sure that One Water delivers for healthy waterways. We are certainly, I feel like, have a good thumb on the pulse of what is going on across the region. So yeah, I would leave it at that. And I just also wanted to make sure I said, because I realize this is just so important, that this Water Funder initiative was really made possible by our partnership and our strong advocates at the Mitchell Foundation, without whom, you know, turning and talking to their partners in the philanthropic world nationally, we really wouldn't have had this opportunity and had this platform to talk about all of this great work that's happening in Central Texas. So worth mentioning that. And I'd welcome any other thoughts on that question.
Well, I'll just add one thing that I wanted to make sure came across in this discussion is, you know, how important I think the network, but then also the motivation that the Water Funder Initiative, you know, grant gave us all to really like examine where we had shared goals, because that's just so important to building a coalition. And so I just, you know, we all always work together and kind of, I think, recognize who's doing what and are talking, but the whole process has really allowed this to become more formalized and to really like think through like what each of us are doing and how doing that together is going to, you know, achieve greater impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, gosh, I see it's 3:59. Sorry.
Yeah.
I know there's so much just phenomenal information and everything, you know, hearing about all the great work that's going on. Katherine, I don't know if with that, if you want to kind of take us home with some closing remarks for the day.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you all so much for joining this panel, first of all, and thank you, John. I'll go ahead and just say that John's email is john@hillcountryalliance.org. And so if anyone has any questions about the network, wants to learn more about how the network can support your organization or your community, definitely I will volunteer John to be a go-to resource for you. All right, so I'm going to bring us